So thank you and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk to you about community redevelopment in what I would term an ecosystem approach, and a little bit more introduction on me and my organization. I first met Dr. Andrus, Lori, I think about 8 years ago when we were on a statewide committee in Texas looking at social determinants of health. And I had quite an education throughout that process. And I think it is a very good sign that we are beginning to talk urban planners and community developers and health professionals and others about coming at community development in a more holistic way. I think the main aim of our efforts here is to address that adage that your zip code should not determine your longevity or your educational attainment, how much you earn, or your general quality of life. And noting fully that correlation does not equal causation, I'm sad to report that I think your zip code is, in fact, a very good predictor of all of those things. And that is what those of us who are involved in community development are seeking to rectify. And I feel that I must give a disclaimer to this audience. I'm not an academic or a public health professional. So what I'm going to share with you are just my observations and, in fact, opinions with about 40 years experience in urban planning. And I would encourage us to think about community development similar to the way those of us involved in environmental issues might think about restoring a broken ecosystem. I'm going to share with you what some of the historical causes of neighborhood disinvestment and decline are, some of which Dr. Andrus has already mentioned. Also going to talk about some of the actors, particularly the government and private actors that can share or impart interventions. And then I'm going to close with some of the metrics I think we ought to be using to measure success. So first of all, what is community development? I found this definition on a website that I will encourage you to take a look at because I think it has a lot of information germane to your topic today. But basically, intentional collective actions to improve social, economic, physical, and environmental well-being while preserving valuable aspects of the culture of a particular geographic area. Now, that is no small task. It involves many moving parts. And as I mentioned before, with my educational journey at the merging of health and urban planning, it really is going to take some silo busting and a lot of disciplines that have heretofore been functioning in relative isolation coming together with more of a multi-sectoral approach. And that begins by dialogue such as we're having today. So I'm going to boil what I consider to be the ecosystem components into a very simplified triangle of interrelated factors. The first, obviously, is the community itself, the various stages and stations in life of its members and the challenges they face, as well as the, if you'll pardon the cliche, the social fabric that exists, whether that be expressed through formal institutions or informal networks, and basically how people relate to each other in that setting. The second edge of the triangle is the economy. And I don't want to overemphasize that, but economic characteristics of a community, I think, are also pretty good predictors of health outcomes. So first and foremost, does the community offer jobs, opportunities to derive income, and I would submit even longer term generational wealth building? There's a second factor, I think, that gets underappreciated sometimes in looking at the economy. That's not just the jobs, but what does that local economy yield in terms of the availability of goods and services to its residents, and more on that in a minute. And then finally, environment, I'm speaking really in two tiers on that part. Obviously, we think of the environment as, that which is not human. So green space, air and water quality, presence of toxins, hazardous waste materials, and I would say even just the general aesthetics of the environment. And there's been some research that shows that access to green space and nature is very helpful in the development, particularly of children. So we're talking about environment in terms of green, if you will, and then the built environment, which we also have a lot of ability to influence positively or negatively. So the built environment, of course, includes the structures we live in. It includes the structures we do business in, structures we congregate in, and then the infrastructure that helps connect those things and keep them safe. Those can be things like roads, bridges, water, sewer, flood control, and the like. And so I would submit to you that, as Dr. Andrus noted, the interrelatedness of these three things is very important. We can have good jobs available, but they might be in a polluting industry. We could have strong community organizations, but if we don't have basic services or safe sanitary housing, that the whole process doesn't quite flow. The problem is, as I mentioned before, the actors involved and the change agents involved must be on the same page for this all to lift the boats, if you will. So, and again, this is a vast simplification, but I think the key elements that help shape the ecosystem are obviously the government. And there I'm talking about everything from the city or county government to state and federal policies. Talking about the private sector, while government controls a lot of the physical landscape, most of the buildings, if you will, themselves are created by private investment, and there are different factors at play determining if those are meeting the community needs. And then the final one, it may not be the correct academic term, but I would call them societal factors. And this can be at the micro level, again, that neighborhood community fabric, but I think they also include broader things that happen in a metro area, broader community, or even national. And I'll unpack what I mean by each of those a little bit more in just a second. So what does the government do to affect the quality of a community? Obviously, the government, particularly local government, has a lot of control on what gets built where through regulations. They can regulate land use, they can regulate building and housing requirements, they can regulate trying to keep properties out of harm's way through things like nuisance ordinances, prohibiting noxious land uses in a community, and otherwise the power to protect residents and local governments, particularly those that have what's termed home rule status, have a really pretty wide authority to regulate these things. And when Dr. Andrus mentioned overlay districts and the like, those are often prime shapers of what private developer actors are able to do.